well, yeah,
Good. Okay. We would like to get started, and so that we can maybe get our sound calibrated, so that we're not blowing everybody's eardrums away. Just a couple of details. Folks know where the bathrooms are. They're kind of down these hallways, and then the coffee is down the hallway around like the corner there. There's coffee and water, and it's also where lunch will be. That's pretty much it for details of that sort. You know, I'm not getting the attention of the people in the hall. Yeah, that, something like that. Yes. Not only that, you get the kitchen knives, and you get I don't know how to get them in here.
Use your teacher voice.
Yeah, I don't teach. I wouldn't subject anyone to that. I think probably the best thing is really just to start. And that's what I will do. Welcome. I always get choked up at this point. This is our 11th annual Rochester Chesterton Conference. I mean, everyone is a miracle. So it's great, and it's great to be here, and I appreciate your coming. We have so many people to thank that I gotta just really truncate my thanks all the time. But mostly, we owe this really in large part to the bazillion fathers of Rochester who fund us, who put up with us, who house us. Father Hetzler takes care of us. I mean, they've always backed, without question, our Chesterton conferences here, and without them, I mean, this just wouldn't be here. If you know anything about money, it wouldn't be here for me. So I mean, they help us out so much. And then there's a lot of volunteers, and they're mostly people that I abuse throughout the day. And it's a lot of these younger guys from the St. Irenaeus Ministries, and they're always so very helpful, setting up chairs and microphone and all those kind of hidden things that just seem to just work, and then putting up with me, and they're just really marvelous. We have many other volunteers too who do things like man the registration table, take pictures, and stuff like this. So I mean, we have them to thank. We have speakers that travel a good distance to come here, and most of them travel a good distance. One of them comes from Scottsville, so that doesn't count. They generously give of their time, and we really appreciate them. And we all appreciate your attending this. That it really means a lot to see your faces out there. Okay, so there are some other details. We'll have a couple of raffle items and an auction sort of thing that Dale will run throughout the day, and any of the money that will just go to the American Chesterton Society. So we have some kind of fun things with that. We'll announce that later after we get through the first speaker. Lunch tickets are available there. The lunch, we just charge $5. I mean, it costs more than that. The bazillion subsidizes too. But if you want to have lunch, lunch is in the cafeteria around the back there. Please buy a ticket because it helps us to keep it count, so we know how much trouble we're in with number of pizzas and stuff like that. It's one of our little challenges here is without a registration thing, we never know how many people are going to show up. It's great fun. So we'll have, let's see, raffles. We have book sales all over the place here. 3 of our 4 speakers are prolific writers, and so they have got books to sell, and it really helps them financially to buy their books, and also that if you're nice to them, they'll sign their books. So please take advantage of that. And we have Wayne Lyon Press also in the cafeteria there, and he's come again this year. And he's always got some great books too, but Bob didn't write any of those books, I don't think. So anyway, check out his collection back there. Okay, and we also have materials on the table. There'll be some informational materials about things like St. Irenaeus Ministries. I believe St. John Bosco School, the new Chesterton Academy of Rochester, some other groups give us kind of flyers and brochures to display. So check out the tables when you're in the lobby, etc. Okay, in the format, our format, we have 2 speakers in the morning, 2 speakers in the afternoon, and what we like to do is just have a lot of time in between the speakers. It just gives you time to mill around, talk to people, meet people, talk to the speakers, buy their books, have coffee, and kind of relax your mind. Because some of these people will actually force you to think. I know that's hard to do on Saturday or any day for most of us, but so we try to have as loose a format as possible. We don't have questions after each speaker. We have, if as time permits, we will have a question and answer session at the very end, and it's a panel question and answer session. So if you have questions that you think would be really interesting for a panel to handle, write it down and give it to, you can give it to me or to John Fraser, who is standing right there. And he'll take your questions, and then he'll feed them to the speakers. And I find that panel format really works, and it makes much more interesting. And then if you have particular questions, these speakers are here all day; they're stuck. We pay them huge fees, so please take advantage. Go right up to them. Don't be afraid to talk to them, to challenge them, to make them work for their fee. They're always glad to talk. Okay. The title of this conference is Tremendous Trifles, and I don't know how many of you know about Tremendous Trifles. It's a book written by P.K. Chesterton. It's a collection of essays, I think primarily, Dale will correct me, never mind him, probably from Illustrated London News, written, Daily News, written between 1901 and 1913. That's correct. He's essay. It's a collection of some of his best, and it's always been a really classic collection of tales, so we thought we would call this conference Tremendous Trifles, not just because it's a great book, but there's some very interesting things in Tremendous Trifles, and you're going to hear of some of them. That's the book, by the way, where the essay Tremendous Trifles ends with that famous Chesterton quote, the world will never starve for want of wonders, but only for want of wonder. But he's got these great essays on trifling matters, what the world looks at as trifling matters. But in Chesterton's pen, they stop being trifling with essays like A Piece of Chalk, What I Found in My Pocket, The Orthodox Barber, and then The 12 Men, with the great essay actually that's on the jury system and also about the 12 apostles. But in each case, he starts off with something that sounds trifling. Only under his pen, you see that things are not so trifling as they seem, and yet everything is handled with such a very light touch. Our real topic today. Okay. Well, previous conferences, we've handled all kinds of different Chestertonian topics. We had conferences on things like paradox, wonder, conversion of heart, history we don't know, literary points of light, Shakespeare as Catholic, Lewis, Tolkien, Solzhenitsyn. We've talked about all kinds of stuff. Today, we're going to talk about Chesterton himself, with particular regard to his personal sanctity. And you say, well, sanctity, Lou, what's kind of a topic is sanctity for a Chesterton conference? And then, Lou, you say, what could this guy say about sanctity? What does he know? I mean, he has absolutely no qualifications or certification to talk about anything like sanctity. And, he's in way over his head. He doesn't know what he's talking about. What is this guy trying to put together? He's got to be out of his gourd. And I would say, yes, I would agree with you. I have no qualifications to talk about sanctity at all. And therefore, as somehow as Chesterton would have said, I shall proceed to talk about it. Peter Kreeft in his book on how to change the culture, how to win the culture war, points out that one saint can do more damage to the modern culture than any other weapon. I don't think Peter Kreeft is wrong, but it's something that we tend to forget about. In fact, we tend to forget that we're all called to sainthood. And I know what you're thinking, what am I doing here? I'm listening about sainthood. This is great. This is going to be a long day. We're all called to sanctity. We're all called to holiness. Father Wilde would say that the only tragedy in a man's life is that he would die not a saint. In deference to Father Wilde, he didn't make that up. He read that somewhere actually, but it's good. It's good. That is actually true. It's been held by a number of great thinkers. So anyway, that's what we want to talk about. Now, convenient to our topic, there's a movement afoot to canonize G.K. Chesterton. So it's kind of like it just works right in sync with the Rochester Chesterton Society's theme. It's amazing how things like that work for us. When you consider Chesterton, though, it seems a little bit paradoxical. How does this overweight, ale-drinking, cigar-smoking, Fleet Street journalist, who's a novelist, a poet, a dramatist, an essayist, arguing for the faith, arguing philosophy, arguing science, arguing history, a man of the world, really well-traveled and well-educated, arguing with people like Wells and Shaw and other great minds and not so great minds of his time. What possible chance does he have for sanctity, for sainthood? And of course, the real question that, if you're raised Catholic, you really ask is what kind of a holy card would this look like? This big fat saint with a cigar in one hand and a mug of beer in the other. And much less the statue that you put in your yard, it's a little hard to picture, frankly. I have trouble with that myself. But think about it. Look at the communion of saints. We have this, in the church, okay, and you got these great saints. The communion of saints, you can talk about the communion of saints for a little bit, but let me give some startling examples, like St. Simeon Stylites on top of his pillar for 30 years. Climbing up a pillar every day and praying up there all day to the mockery and laughter of the crowd, and yet people sought him for spiritual help, but living on a pillar. St. Lawrence, the Roman prefect, whatever, commands him to bring in the riches of the church, and so the next day he brings in all the poor and the blind and the maimed. maimed. And, it was not the right answer. So they tortured him to death, and as they're baking him, he says he's being cooked alive, and he says, "Well, this side is done. You might want to flip me over," something like that. That's from the Latin. That's my translation, anyway. St. Nicholas, jolly St. Nick, actually, he punched Arius in the face during one of the councils for being a heretic. Or little St. Nicholas Owen, one of my personal favorites, who built priest holes in England, was tortured to death for it. And they haven't found some of these priest holes for a couple of hundred years. I mean, they were finding them hundreds of years later. Am I right, Dale seen some of these? St. Pius Petrolcino, otherwise known as Padre Pio, who had this annoying, kind of gift for turning up in two places at once. Co-location. If you just look at the communion of saints, you realize, we got some really strange saints in this church, and it's great to have. But we have this kind of idea of what sainthood is and this aura of sainthood, and we're here today to kind of poke a little fun at that and blast away at it from a Chesterton perspective. Chesterton observed that God sends to each time not the saint it wants necessarily, but the saint it needs. The church, you would observe, is a big place, and probably something like heaven. So, how do you approach the subject of sanctity? As evidenced by G.K. Chesterton. I mean, how would you do this? How would you possibly begin to tackle this subject? And I use the solution on, get in some people who know what they're talking about and have them talk about it. So that's what we've done. Father Robert Weil comes to us from Canada, from Madonna House, and I think he's going to change your perspective a bit on mysticism. Talking about Chesterton's mysticism. Father Scott Caton is going to talk about Chesterton's charitable apologetic style. Joseph Pierce is going to talk about Chesterton's humility and thankfulness. And then Dale is going to talk about whatever Dale talks about. I just gave a title and told him to fill in the outline. And this title is The Outline of Sanctity. So I think we're going to have 4 speakers that are going to be really interesting, looking at sanctity from a number of different angles. Now, I don't imagine that people have read Tremendous Trifles. Some of you maybe have. So I thought I'd read it. No, I'm going to read a little passage of it. And there's a little point to this passage, and it may puzzle you, but I just want to spend 2 seconds after I read it to tell you what I see in it and list some of the things, and then close. Hang on a second, please. In this little essay, Chesterton is hurtling toward his death. He won't die. I mean, he wrote it down, right? So he wrote this, so he doesn't die. Don't worry. But he's taken a cab, and he's used to being jostled around a cab, and there's sort of a bump or a jostle, whatever, and he notices that the driver seems to have fallen off by the side of the road, and now this cab is freewheeling and heading for disaster. So he muses a bit. Here we go. I believe in preaching to the converted, for I've always generally found that the converted do not understand their own religion. That was apt for today. Thus, I've always urged in this paper, meaning the paper that he's writing for, the newspaper, that democracy has a deeper meaning than Democrats understand. That is, common and popular things, proverbs, and ordinary sayings always have something in them unrealized by most who repeat them. Okay, so here's this carriage hurtling down the hill, and he's musing in this way. Here is one. We have all heard about the man who is in momentary danger, and who sees the whole of his life pass before him in a moment. In the cold, literal, and common sense of words, this is obviously a thundering lie. Nobody can pretend that an accident or a mortal crisis, in an accident or mortal crisis, he elaborately remembered all the tickets he'd ever taken to Wimbledon or all the times he'd ever passed the brown bread and butter. But in those few moments, while my cab was tearing toward the traffic of the Strand, I discovered that there's a truth behind this phrase, as there is behind all popular phrases. I did really have, in that short and shrieking period, a rapid succession of a number of fundamental points of view. I had, so to speak, about 5 religions in as many seconds. My first religion was pure paganism, which among sincere men is more shortly described as extreme fear. Then there succeeded a state of mind which is quite real, but for which no other proper name has been found. The ancients called it Stoicism. I think it must have been what the German lunatics mean, if they mean anything, when they talk about pessimism. It was an empty and open acceptance of anything that happens, as if one had got beyond the value of it. And then, curiously enough, came a very strong contrary feeling. That things mattered very much indeed, and yet that they were something more than tragic. It was a feeling, not that life was unimportant, but that life was much too important ever to be anything but life. I hope that this was Christianity. At any rate, it occurred at the moment when we went crash into the omnibus. It seemed to me that the hansom cab simply turned over on top of me, like an enormous hood or hat. I then found myself crawling out from underneath it in attitudes so undignified that they must have added enormously to that great cause to which the Anti-Puritan League and I have recently dedicated ourselves. I mean the cause of the pleasures of the people. As to my demeanor when I emerged, I have 2 confessions to make, and they are both made merely in the interests of mental science. The first is that whereas I had been in a quite pious frame of mind the moment before the collision, when I got to my feet and found I had got off with a cut or 2, I began, like St. Peter, to curse and to swear. A man offered me a newspaper or something I had dropped. I can distinctly remember consigning the paper to a state of irremediable spiritual ruin. I'm very sorry for this now, and I apologize both to the man and to the paper. I have not the least idea what was the meaning of this unnatural anger. I mention it as a psychological confession. It was immediately followed by extreme hilarity. And I made so many silly jokes to the policeman that he disgraced himself by continual laughter before all the little boys in the street who had hitherto taken him seriously. Now, that's that's a trivial sort of example maybe. But if you read it about 8 times, you'll see a number of very interesting things in it. An almost overpowering Christian joy. We talk about that communion of saints, and that's like the lowest common denominator. I hope it's not the highest common factor, because maybe I'm in heresy, but I think it's the lowest common denominator of all those saints, all those crazy saints that we talk about, is joy. A love for common things in a common man, a towering humility, a kind of verbal collocation. Chesterton, you think he's here, you think he's there, he moves really fast, and he ties together ideas that don't seem to link, and suddenly he's right in front of you. An organic appreciation of Scripture. I began, like St. Peter, to curse and to swear. He really understands where St. Peter was. And something that Marshall McLuhan called a primary intuition of being. what I would call sort of an ingrained Thomism. And a hilarious enjoyment of his own discomfiture. All kind of marks of a saintly perspective. Thus, tremendous trifles. Thank you. And by the way, I'm sorry.
Okay.
As I mentioned before, we will have raffles and other things throughout the day and the money will go to the American Chesterton Society, and we will get those set up shortly. Dale, are you ready to talk? You want the microphone now?
No, I just wanted, Lou, do you know after St. Lawrence was burned to death and he entered heaven, do you know what God said to him?
No, I don't.
Well done, thou good and faithful servant.